Why do the religious bother to defend their beliefs when they have no actual evidence to support it? That's the question we're here today to answer, and sadly, we have to rely on Greg Koukl, and we all know just how useless he is. Still, let's give him a shot, because even a broken clock is right twice a day, although in Greg's case, that's probably an overestimate. So, onward, fair viewers, onward into oblivion. We're back today with Greg Koukl and Amy. No idea what her last name is, but it's part of their podcast where he's trying to explain things badly, as if that's remotely a surprise. Greg doesn't understand much, but he certainly has his hand out for your money, doesn't he? So let's jump right into part 2 and see if Greg is any better here. I don't think you should be expecting a whole lot. This is Greg Koukl we're talking about, but let's see anyhow. I want to give him a fair shake.
All I'm appealing to is the common sensibility of it that's accessible to the average person.
Except common sense is not the same thing as being factually true. This is why they use it, though, because they are looking for emotional comfort, which common sense appeals to, not demonstrable fact, which it just doesn't. Anyone appealing to common sense is an idiot. Common sense is often just wrong. That's the problem. We can point to all kinds of examples, and I've done that plenty of times in the past, where things people believe on common sense are just laughably false. Lightning never strikes in the same place twice. Well, yes it does. Absolutely it does. Because if it didn't, then lightning rods wouldn't work. You can watch tall structures get struck again and again and again. Why? Because that's how lightning works. And we can go on and on and on and on, all of these common sense beliefs that are just factually incorrect. Greg doesn't care, though, because Greg is an idiot. Greg is only trying to get to his fee-fees, and that is positively childish.
Now, if somebody wants to say, not necessarily, I got it, here's how we can explain how you could have morality without God. Okay, fine, I'll listen. Now what we have is a very complicated and counterintuitive explanation from Darwinian evolution.
Except you don't listen because you don't want it to be true. Trust me, I've had that conversation many times with moral realists, both religious and non-religious alike, and they just refuse to listen. They are desperate to believe the things that they take on faith. They desperately want to believe the things that make them happy. They don't want to know the actual reality. They just want the comforting fantasy, and that means absolutely nothing. These are the conversations that we have that go absolutely nowhere because they don't care about the truth. You can present the evidence, and they have a long list of ready excuses for why they couldn't care less about the facts. They just really want to believe. It really is stupid.
That's what's complicated. Or, design. Well, the reason it looks designed is we just happen to be the universe of an infinite numbers that looks the way it is, that produced us, and now we're there to be able to wonder why it looks so unique. The multiverse kind of, or the weak anthropic principle kind of answer.
That's not how I've ever heard it put, but Greg just likes to make stuff up, so that's not really a surprise. See, the problem is that these people, they want to be special. They want to feel like they were intended, when in reality they're not. It's always an emotional thing. They have desires, and those desires do not accurately represent the world in which they demonstrably live. And when you try to explain where they're going wrong, they want nothing at all to do with that. They just desperately want to believe. They are desperately looking for ways to stroke their own egos, and that's just absurd. It's why I call these people immature children, because really that's what they are.
Well, that's what's complicated, seems to me.
But reality is complicated. That's kind of your problem, Greg. You are looking for the most simplistic answer that you can make up in your head that strokes your ego and makes you feel better. You don't care about the actual truth, because the actual truth might not be comforting. You want simple, stupid stuff that floats your boat, but that's not how reality works. Reality is complicated, but you're just not bright enough to work these things out for yourselves. So you just believe what it says in a book, or you believe what some idiot in a dress tells you from the pulpit, and if that gives you a theological woodies, well, it's just gotta be true. This is what these morons are doing wrong. But they don't care, do they? They just really want to believe.
And so if we're going to answer that challenge to the common sense notion, then it's going to take more complication. And I don't think coming to the truth about most things, many things, let's put it that way, is that hard.
Except you're wrong. This is why the religious tend to be largely uneducated, or at least lack advanced degrees, especially in the sciences, because they are trying to make reality into something that it's just not. This is all, but it seems to me nonsense, which is entirely irrelevant because how it seems to you means absolutely nothing in the real world. It only matters how things are, not how you wish they were. And that's something that's almost impossible to get across to these lunatics. Because they don't care. Greg doesn't care. Greg is a con man trying to sell an imaginary solution to a made-up problem to gullible people, and he's been doing that forever. I'm sure he believes it, but he shouldn't. Nobody should. People ought to be rational, and it seems to me just isn't rational. It's dumb. But then again, look at who we're talking about here, right?
But if one is going to kind of disqualify the discipline because it's hard, well, then you're going to have to disqualify science and philosophy and a whole range of other things that are means of knowing truth that are complex, complicated, hard.
See, here's where he's just uprooted the goalposts. He's supposed to be answering, why do Christians have to work so hard to defend Christianity if it's true? Well, actual truth isn't necessarily easy. The simple answer, the very simple answer, is almost always wrong. Yet humans are almost always lazy, and they just want something simple to follow, now and forever, that they don't have to ever think about again, because thinking about stuff is hard. But that doesn't get you to the truth, does it? It gets you to believing in things that are just downright wrong. But because Greg is convinced that Christianity is automatically true, nothing else matters. It's the hard work to prove it that counts, not the blind faith that the religious have that it's just gotta be true because we like it so there. These people have a terrible epistemology, but they don't care, and it shows.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Knowledge is work. You have to think hard. You have to think carefully. You have people making a case for all sorts of things. You have different philosophers and people making the case for the philosophy they think is true, the science they think is true. Richard Dawkins has written many books. Does that mean what he believes is false?
And another country heard from. And here's the thing. We're not after what anybody thinks is true, or at least we shouldn't be. We ought to be after what is true, demonstrably, based on the evidence that we have and nothing else. Your feelings don't matter. Science is what the evidence says it is, not what scientists say, what the evidence says. In fact, I can't think of anything worthwhile where that isn't the case. The evidence matters. Only the evidence matters. The people and their feelings, they don't. Yet for the religious, the opposite is true. They don't care about the evidence one bit. They only care about their feelings. They only care about what sounds good to me. And that's downright stupid. It really is. But people like Greg can't admit that. Otherwise, he'd have to go out and get a real job, and he certainly doesn't want to do that, does he?
It doesn't follow, but I think there's something going on here where they're putting religion in a different category from all these other areas of knowledge, and it's just not a fair move.
Well, because it is. It's not a category of knowledge, it's pure fifis and faith. It is fanaticism, not fact. You cannot set all of your wishes and dreams aside and proceed only on the evidence that we have available to us right now. And that's why religion is so laughable. I mean, this is kind of like having a favorite flavor of ice cream. You're certainly welcome to do so. Pick something that tastes good to you. Eat only that flavor if you want. Nobody cares. This isn't a statement about the actual state of factual reality. It's not true in the sense of truth being something that is demonstrable in the real world. It's not like you're saying, well, this is objectively the right flavor of ice cream for everyone. At least you better not be, because you'd just be wrong, because no such things exist. But for religion, that is exactly what they're saying. They have no evidence whatsoever that their religion is true, yet they are stating that it is, confidently, simply because it makes them feel good to think that it's true. But that doesn't make it true. That's what makes religion downright delusional. When you get to positive statements about reality, you have to have a whole lot more than your say-so. And sadly, the religious never do.
We all understand that people argue for what they think is true, and that you have to work to understand and respond to people who object to what you believe. That's just a simple thing that we see all the time.
But it's also up to you to defend what you believe in some objectively verifiable way, depending on what the discussion is about, of course. I mean, ice cream, who cares? The existence of stuff in reality, that matters, and there is a much higher epistemic requirement to present a credible case. And sadly, they don't have any of that. They are treating this like it is their favorite flavor of ice cream. Well, it tastes good to me. So what? That doesn't mean it tastes good to other people. That doesn't mean that your tastes are the standard by which everyone else has to abide. No, you're just making a fool of yourself. What sounds good to you, what you want to believe, all of that is irrelevant if your claims do not stand up to objective critical scrutiny. This is where your opinions go completely by the wayside. When you start making claims about things that you say exist in objective reality, you gotta back those up. They either do or they don't. And it's your job to support it in a way that convinces other people intellectually that you have the slightest clue what you're talking about. And Greg and this lady, sorry, I think her name is Amy, but they don't have any sense of their own rational responsibilities because they don't care. They just have blind and completely empty faith, and that is not enough.
I think it is easy not to believe in God if you don't look too closely at the nature of reality.
Actually, the opposite is true. If you don't pay any attention to what is actually going on, and if you're willing to just staple "God done it" on everything for emotionally comforting reasons, then theism is simple. It's only when you try to verify things that you run into trouble. And that's what happened to me. I tried to verify the things that I took on faith, and everything started falling apart because I wasn't willing to just gloss over the facts when they conflicted with my prior beliefs, when they got in the way of my faith. When there was a problem, I wanted to know why that problem existed. I didn't say, oh, well, there just isn't really a problem. My beliefs are perfect. There isn't a problem at all. Reality just must be wrong. And then just go on believing what I always had. And that is another important part. I was willing to change my mind on my faith if it turned out that it wasn't supported by the evidence that I had, because I recognized that the evidence was far more important than my faith. So Greg is just wrong again, and what else is new?
It's easy not to believe in God. Oh, I don't see him, so he's not there.
Yes, get rid of faith. That's the whole point of having a rational epistemology. You don't just assume things are true because you really want them to be. You want to verify them in some objective way, whereas religion is trying to do exactly the opposite. It believes what it wants to be true and doesn't bother to check out the corroboratory evidence to see if it actually is. Because finding out that you're wrong just might hurt your precious widow Fifi's, and that's childish. Even I, as a newly questioning Christian, I knew that. Why would God lie to us? If God created everything, then why do we not trust the creation to show us the way? Except it doesn't actually work out that way, does it? The ones making all the excuses are the religious because the evidence doesn't actually support their beliefs. It just proves how ridiculous your beliefs are. The more you look at the real world without those rose-colored religious glasses, the more obvious it is that the religious have something to hide. It's why they've got all the excuses. Because the truth doesn't need excuses. It just is what it is. Think about that one for a while. Let's see if you come up with anything interesting.
It's a very, very simple, straightforward, epistemic approach. I don't see him, so he's not there. I'm not belittling that. I'm just saying that seems to be the way a lot of people who are atheists approach it.
Yes, facts first, faith never. That's how people approach everything else in life, except religion. Religion is the special circumstance, right? But it shouldn't be. There should be no double standards. If the standard that we have, the one that works for everything else but not for religion, if that doesn't work, then there's a problem. Religion is that problem. Religion is wrong. They just won't accept it because they don't want to. I'm going to pull this one out of the religious playbook, but it's not a head problem, it's a heart problem. They don't want their heartfelt religious beliefs to be wrong, even if they are. They just can't handle it. This is why they invent the double standard in the first place, because it's the only way they can maintain their ridiculous beliefs. It's why they have all the excuses. This isn't an us problem, it's a them problem. And nobody ought to be surprised at that. Nobody at all.
Some are much more sophisticated, I acknowledge that. But a lot of times when you talk with somebody who's an atheist, they say, well, where is he? I don't see him. That's what they responded. So that's easy to say that. But it's not easy to say that if you look closely at the nature of reality.
It's absurdly easy to do that because there is no evidence for any gods apparent. See, here's the problem that people like Greg and Amy have. They are starting with the preconception that God is real. They just want God to be real. They can't justify it, but they just really want it to be true. Therefore, because they can't ditch their preconceived notions and they're not being remotely rational, everything suddenly becomes evidence for this imaginary God. Well, I don't get it, therefore God done it. It's the same thing, honestly, that Bigfoot people and UFO nuts are doing. Everything is evidence for Bigfoot. Everything is evidence for aliens. Not finding a Bigfoot body is evidence that Bigfoot is real because, reasons. Yeah, reasons. They'll just make it up. They will never admit that these things aren't supported because their entire personal self-concept is based around the idea that they are. These people are lunatics. It's not that hard to understand.
Even a marginally closer look convinces you that effects have causes that are adequate to the effect.
Which doesn't make it a god. It just means you don't know what the cause is. Greg is so convinced that his God is real that he's lost the capacity to be remotely objective about it. Well, of course it's my God. I mean, seriously, listen to these people sometime. You will hear this all the time. Well, what else could it be? A near infinite number of other stuff. The fact is, we don't know, and you don't just get to make shit up. The time to say, God done it, is when you have evidence for that God and the connective tissue that shows that that real God that you've already demonstrated was actually real, was actually responsible. And the religious never have that. They just leap to emotionally comforting conclusions because they wanna. And that's really stupid.
Big Bang needs a big banger, you know? And on and on, like I said. So tell me what Deb had to say. The reason I paused was because Shane's was more clear to me how to respond. I need to think about Deb's.
So Deb's was, great website, but is it true? If it was, would you have this website?
I mean, granted, that is kind of a dumb question. Now, I haven't gone and looked at their website for a very long time, so let's go do that. This is their website on the day that I'm writing this. It probably looks a little bit different today, but it is what it is. I poked around there a little bit, looked at some articles, stuff like that, and nothing on the site actually tries to justify their beliefs. Nothing. It's all, well, because this is true, and then all the stuff that they've just tacked on. If somebody like me, who doesn't believe any of it, went to their website, as I just did, and read all the stuff that I just read, and said, cool claims, dude, now prove it, I'd come away very disappointed because all they've got is, my book says a thing, and I've got faith. And that is not enough. It's just not. Not for anyone rational. But here, Greg is just trying desperately to get away from the rational because he doesn't care about being rational at all. His entire argument is, well, it seems to me because I've got faith. And that is positively idiotic. I honestly don't get people like Greg. I mean, I get them. I kind of was one at one point in time. I know why they're this way, but I don't understand the thought processes that go into it, mostly because I don't think there are any thought processes involved. They don't care about reality. They expect reality to conform to their beliefs, not the other way around. This is not about truth. It's about comfort, and that's really fucking stupid.
I don't understand that.
I think it's just similar, this idea that why do you need a website if it's true? You're obviously just trying to convince us of something false.
Which is a good point, because as I said, their website isn't trying to convince anyone of anything. It isn't presenting evidence for anything. It's just making empty claims that they aren't remotely trying to justify rationally at all. They just really want it to be true. So maybe this is just a malformed question? I don't know. I'm not trying to put words into anyone's mouth. Maybe if I had been the one to ask, I would have said something like, why does your website not try to justify your beliefs with evidence? Because guess what? If you go over to the Flat Earth Society's website, they're doing the exact same thing. Now, that hasn't really been updated for a long time. Their last blog post was 2016, but they're doing the exact same thing, just making claims without actual, fairly evaluated supporting evidence because they really want it to be true. The few places they even try, it's just obviously cherry-picked. Just like creationists do. They are not after the truth. They just really want to believe too.
I think it's just the same kind of principle that it shouldn't be hard work.
Well, the counterexamples are atheist websites.
Right.
Atheists aren't making positive claims. You are. We're just pointing out how wrong you are, or at least I am, because I don't speak for anybody else. I can't say for anyone else, of course, because I'm not them. I honestly don't go to atheist websites all that often. Now, I'm sure he's going to say something else. We'll get there in a second, but there really is no comparison. Of course, Greg honestly thinks that everyone is just like he is because he can't get out of his own head and look out into the real world from an honest perspective. But let's give him a chance and see where he's going with this, although I don't think it's going to be anywhere worthwhile.
Right.
There are all kinds of atheist websites. There are all kinds of Jesus mythicist websites. There are all kinds of websites about all kinds of things that purport to give information that's true. Some on the religious issue side, like atheism, would be addressing that question, or other issues. It doesn't make any sense to me to suggest that if you have a website trying to show that something is true, this is evidence that the something you're trying to show is true is actually not true.
It took him a while to get there, didn't it? But he's still missing the point. Atheist websites, and I can only go by the ones that I've seen, and like I said, I don't pay a whole lot of attention, but they are not making positive claims about atheism, because atheism is not a positive claim. They are just providing evidence that the crap that the religious say is just bullshit. They are trying to move that crap out of the way just as fast as you people can sling it. And if that's a claim, and it might be, they are providing copious amounts of evidence that what they are saying is actually true. They are showing that the religious are full of crap. Unlike Greg, because he's just running on pure fifis and faith. And I recently heard from a hearing impaired viewer who said that according to YouTube's automated subtitles, that fifis comes across as feces and faith. And yeah, that kind of still works, doesn't it? So thank you so much for writing in. I know that it's hard when you have to rely on YouTube for anything. I just don't have the time to do actual subtitles myself. I wish I could. I've thought about it, but I honestly don't have the time. If anyone else would like to do so, volunteer, that would be great. I would be happy to provide my original scripts if that would help. Although, granted, they aren't always completely accurate because sometimes they just go off into the wild blue yonder, but if anybody wants to volunteer, let's make it happen.
I don't know how else to take that. And I'm not trying to be uncharitable to Deb, but I just don't know how to take that.
It doesn't really matter because you'd find a way to spin it to your advantage. Because that's really all he's doing here, right? It's all spin. He can't understand why anyone would criticize him. And of course, he's not alone. I've pointed this out many, many, many times before on the channel. That these nutball apologists, they have to know that what they're saying is nonsense, given all the times that they have been corrected. Yet they just keep saying the same thing because they can't conceivably be wrong. That would just make them feel bad, and they can't have that. This is what happens when you care only about your feces. And yes, I said feces there on purpose, and not the facts. Because for anyone who's actually rational and cares, if anybody comes up to you and says, you're wrong here, 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 and here, and here's why, you actually take that seriously. You examine the evidence that you've been presented with, you stop saying the stuff that's wrong, or at the very least, you engage in a rational back and forth conversation in an attempt to reach the actual truth. And once you think you've got it, then you stop saying the stuff that's wrong and only say the stuff that's true. People like Greg don't do that. They can't. I mean, Greg is a con man trying to sell courses to the gullible idiots with far too much money and not enough brains. But that's true of most of these shyster apologists, right? They're up there on stage with their hands out for your money. They're only doing it for the money. So why is it that a scientist, say, would stop to have an intelligent conversation, assuming they had time and it was worthwhile, and an apologist will just move on because, hell, they already know it all, right? Why the difference in approach? I don't know, but I've talked to a ton of scientists who are always willing to talk shop unless you're a kook, and then I don't blame them. But the religious, they only want to talk to people on their side. Why? because we don't pay them first, and that's what they're after. And also, it's not emotionally comforting. They don't get anything out of talking to their critics. And if you look at the YouTube channels of these people, they almost without exception don't talk to the atheists. They'll talk to the religious, but when atheists come to call, they've got nothing to say to us, do they? It's no wonder people like Greg don't understand anything, because these people just don't care. And that's one of the saddest things ever, isn't it?